Welcome to the Moulding Private Practice show, where we help healthcare practitioners in private practice keep true to their purpose and build a life of mastery by providing the knowledge, skills, and tools to bring their dreams to life. In this episode of the show, we speak to Johanna Matsetela about being an occupational therapist and everything private practice management related. Johanna Matsetela, thank you very much for being on the show. Welcome on board.
Thank you for inviting me.
I asked in the other show as well. And just sort of cover that in this one. So how did you even find out about the show and decide, did someone strong arm you to be on the show?
Well, when I started my private practice, a good friend of mine or a colleague referred me to SME Metrics. Initially, I was looking for a more efficient, easy to use billing software. So she recommended you guys. I also did some research online, and yeah, you guys were the ones.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that as well. I mean, obviously, we try not to promote anything, but thanks so much for saying that. And I think that's been the journey. I mean, I was joking in the other show, but 9 years ago, I didn't really know what occupational therapists do. So today we're talking about obviously you being an occupational therapist and private practice and all of that stuff. But I remember I was presenting. It was Impact Therapy. I'm not sure if you know about them, but it was done by two OTs, and they used to present these CPD workshops. And I remember presenting at this CPD workshop, and they had like 40 odd practitioners. And I'm not sure where you studied, but at UJ, Mattie van Niekerk, is quite a renowned person in the department there. And she always presented on ethics, and she was there as well. And and then I think over the years, I started learning more and more what OTs do, which was very fascinating for me. But I have to ask, and I ask everyone that's on the show, when you're quite little, people always ask you it's normally embarrassing questions, but it's always in front of other people, and they say, what do you want to do when you grow up? So did a young Johanna say she wanted to become an occupational therapist?
Not at all, funny enough. Growing up, I've always wanted to become a doctor, right?
Okay.
So after matric, in my journey of trying to become a doctor, occupational therapy found me.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was this one instance, I was busy doing my BSc in attempt to get into medical school because the first time I did not get into. So I was doing BSc, and then this one time I had an encounter with occupational therapist in a session with the client. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So by just looking at how they were interacting with the client, some of the activities they were doing, just a basic activity like having a cup of tea with a client with a stroke who could not use her hands, but she could for the first time with the assistance of an OT. I was amazed. And I just saw myself doing that. I was like, that is me, and I want to do that. What is that? So I asked them, and they explained to me what OT is. And it just met all the criteria, it just, yeah. So that's just how OT found me. And ever since, I've been in love with occupational therapy. So yeah, that's how I abandoned being a doctor to become an occupational therapist.
And the world is so glad that you did. And I suppose, going with the OT thing, at least you get a lot more chance to get your sleep in. I think if you became a doctor, you probably have to deal with sleep,
oh my goodness, I'm
sleep deprivation.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. You know what I love about being OTs though, is that you can almost like pick the discipline or the clients that you want to deal with. We had the one, her name is Jessica Dent, and she only deals with like adults and like hand therapy. That's her thing. And I thought that's really cool, because most of the OTs I met before that are like pediatric, and they deal with children, and and I thought that's interesting. And then we met someone else, and she only deals with like workplace stuff, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. Um, and like there's the late Vivian Allers, we had her as a client as well for many years. And she told me, like, you have this mental health part with OT, and I was like, in my mind, like, I couldn't connect that. And obviously I get it now, but yeah, it was actually pretty fascinating. um,
Mm.
so was the journey to become an OT, once you decided that that was the part, was it pretty easy or was it difficult?
Well, it was a bit challenging because in my years of study, firstly, I didn't know what occupational therapy was. I had to do research and just observe and see what people were doing in sessions. So that was a bit tricky, just thinking, am I going to help people do the things they do on a daily basis? How is that going to work? How do you go about telling a or helping a patient to say, oh no, I'm going to help you, with bathing, with making your bed and so forth. It just sounded a bit bizarre,
Mhm.
but then in practice it made sense because we take for granted little things like waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, the ability to be able to do that. So I think for me, that's when it kicked in to say, now, what happens when you have a certain medical condition or a mental condition that affects your participation in that? Where do you go about starting? And that's when I came across the science behind the occupation. And for me, that was just amazing, to say there is science behind what we do on a daily basis that is regarded as basic. Yeah,
Mm.
so since then, I just did more and more research, did a lot of practice, shadowed a lot of occupational therapists. And yeah, I just made up my mind that no, I'm not turning back. This is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I think that's the other thing I learned, throughout the show and working with practitioners, over the last 9 years odd, I think now, is that it's all fine until it's not. Like, it's all fine, like, to learn how to talk and stuff like that. And you said some very easy things like making your bed and having a cup of tea, until it's not. And then when
Hmm.
it's not, who do you speak to? And I think I love that with OTs. I mean, OTs, in my experience, are a lot more tangible. They're like, just get things done. And especially in the earlier days, I mean, I think it's changed now, like with us as a company. But in the earlier days, just OTs just got it for us, like they just understood the software. They just, started working with us. And it was very easy to explain to them, like, actually, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas I found, like, with some of the other disciplines, it just took a lot more time, to just get that traction and that speaking. So, yeah, a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, it's like a jack of all trades, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like at home as well. It's funny that, certain roles would be reserved for men, like,
Mm.
drilling holes and doing that. But I find myself doing for that. And I enjoy them,
Okay.
because with OTs, you're more hands-on, you want to do this and that, even with the training that we receive, you do all of that because you want to understand how to best adapt the environment, the demands that the activity requires,
Mm.
cognitive abilities. So for me, it's really fascinating that there's a lot that goes into just doing an activity.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's true. And I think the other one is like, I think it's part of your study, but you get to learn how to, like, build stuff, for the limbs and stuff like
Even
that.
woodwork as well.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting. What do you call this? The molds, or something like that. Yeah, the
Yeah, so we'd learn from, gardening, like
mm,
literally practically doing gardening
mm,
and doing woodwork as well.
okay.
And yeah, so like, working with hammers, saws, and everything. Hence, I'm
Okay.
saying even now it's easier for me to just drill holes and hang pictures on the wall easily
That's so
than
funny.
my husband. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So Builders must
Yeah.
be your favorite place to go then, to find all of your
Yes.
own. all of your
Oh,
stuff.
definitely. Yeah, I'm more of a physical person, you know.
Mm.
Anything that has to do with construction, you know, I'm there, assembling things, doing things. So yeah, so I think occupational therapy has also given me the platform to just express myself the way I really would like to.
Mm. Thanks for saying that. I mean, we're joking about it, but like if you like very hands-on, and if you like my wife, for instance, like I think like, and she says it, she's a psychologist, but like like she always said, like if she wasn't going to be a a clin psych, she'd probably be an engineer because she likes those type of things as well. And yeah, so for anyone that's like hands-on problem solving, occupational therapy might be another avenue you should probably look at, as
Yeah,
in you're solving
definitely.
problems, you're physically making it and making a difference. I think, for every healthcare practitioner, that's the amazing thing, forgetting the money and forgetting but you're actually making a
Mm.
difference, like if you
Yeah,
see.
no, definitely, definitely, and more especially, you know, just seeing your patients lit up, you know, because regardless of them being on a wheelchair, they can still do things that they used to enjoy doing, regardless of their disability. For me, that's everything, you know.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, that
And
makes
also
sense.
that, I mean, that satisfaction you get, when they look at you and say, wow, I can drink that cup of
Oh,
tea now, that,
definitely.
yeah, I don't think you can put a price on that. Hey, um,
Um,
when we're talking to a speech therapist as well, and she does this, helping people with the ostomy,
mm,
like the tube. And she was
yeah.
just saying, when the patients, after like many, weeks or so, when they can take their first like, taste of yogurt again, it's like, their eyes light up and their face lights up. And, it's like, that's the amazing thing about being a healthcare practitioner. I think that, for anyone, and we're going to go into the private practice part, because I think that's where you kind of marry these two approaches. One is like, being a healthcare practitioner and amazing at it, and helping people. And then if you can, you know, get into the private practice part, then you can probably earn the money you want to as well. And I think you have the best of every world. I mean, I think that's what employees struggle with. That's what business owners struggle with. And almost envious, about healthcare practitioners, especially, like once you get to that stage where you're happy with everything, your private practice, your patient load, all of that. There's that perfect blend, which is amazing.
Definitely.
And did you have to do community service as well? So after varsity?
Yes.
Okay.
I did a year of community service.
Okay.
Um, yeah, before being permanently employed.
Was it
And
good?
I think, yeah, well, it's different from university, you know, because you have resources at university, you know, you're able to see, because I studied at the University of Pretoria. So we were privileged to have done our practicals at an academic institution, right? So the setting is way, way different to where you get placed, you know. So you move from a more resourceful environment to an environment that has no resources at all, you know, it being in the bundus, you know.
Mm,
So what I've learned in that year was adaptation, you know. I've learned to adapt and to just use what I have in the best interest for patients, you know, instead of just complaining, I don't have this and this and that. And that's the beauty about OT, because we have ways of just creating things and adapting things to best work with our clients. And then the other thing that I've learned is that there's no one size fits all treatment. Patients are different, there's diversity. So you always have to work with what the client presents. So you work with the here and now, you know.
mm,
So yeah, so that's the thing I like about OT, is that it's client-centered, you know. It's not necessarily just telling a client what to do. You're more in the background and you let them lead. So you just facilitate and, you know, just modify where necessary. So that's the thing I also liked in my years of community service. The challenging thing about it was that, when you get to a new environment and you are all lively and you want to do things, and you
Mm-hmm.
find people have been there for the longest time. They have adapted to the situation and it looks like you're the only one with a lot of energy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that was a bit challenging for me just to try and fit into the environment without necessarily um, uh, compromising treatment. Yeah,
Mm.
so I think that was the only challenge, but I enjoyed my ComServe. The people I worked with or the people who were supervising me were very nice. And yeah, so I got to learn a lot actually. Because
Okay.
sometimes you have the theory, but then people who have been in the field for the longest time we have experienced things with clients can better help you merge the theory and the practicals together. So yeah, so for me it was nice to discover that.
Okay, that's amazing. Here, there's always like a mixed reaction, to community service. But I must admit, out of all of the episodes we've done with the many practitioners, most of it has been positive. As in, and the common themes seem to be, it was exciting because it was somewhere new, although it was in the Bundus, as you said. But also the camaraderie of the other community service people, because you're normally there with a psychologist and a physio maybe, yeah, and stuff like that. So, and a medical doctor sometimes, and like you're almost like that same age group. And for many, like it's the first time you're earning like proper money, and whereas like at varsity, probably, like you don't have as much. So yeah, it seemed to be very cool. I know my wife was like at in northern KZN, like around Empangeni. She was at a tertiary hospital. And I remember everyone, like, like the one time we went for lunch and they were all together and you could just see all of them bubbling over. And, it was pretty cool to see. um, and so moving from community service to your first post, was that easy as well? Did you just get a post was it at a
Yeah, it
government?
was easy. Yeah, definitely. So after my community service, I worked at a provincial hospital.
Okay.
So that's where you do general OT, physical, neuro, pediatrics, but mental health was not there.
Okay.
So yeah, so I worked there for like a year, and until I moved to a treatment center, a substance abuse treatment center, an inpatient, state owned, by the way.
Okay.
So that's where I started doing mental health and working with service users up until now.
Okay.
So yeah, so during that time, I've noticed that there is a gap in private practice for substance use disorders. So it's mostly a disorder that's given so much attention in the public sector, or you have specific institutions or mental health institutions dealing with that, but it's not given so much priority as opposed to other mental health disorders like your depression, your bipolar, and all that. So I saw a gap in that to say, but this is also something that's causing a lot of problems in occupations. And it's evidence, you would see a young man just roaming around the streets looking uncared. And then you're wondering, but what kind of help is he receiving? The community is also stigmatizing to say, well, it was his fault. What can we do? Whatever, things like that. So I'm hoping that in going into private practice for substance use disorders, I'll be able to, just reach a lot of people and just try and bridge the gap of substance use disorders, especially in teenagers, because it's appalling, these new lifestyle trends that are going, the influence of social media. And yeah, so for me, awareness is key in the private practice that I've just started. So I do a lot of awareness. I volunteer. And I'm part of certain associations as well, where we go and go to schools, present, do motivational talks, I help with school activities as well, Yeah, so yeah, and then I also do pediatrics. So I'm more of an all-round therapist, except
Okay.
for the fact that I can't do medical legal. I don't like I just feel like it's not, there's not that human touch, So
Mm,
I do peace, I do physical, I do mental health, but I don't do your functional capacity evaluations and all that. So I'm more of a one-to-one therapist with a client. I like working with clients and doing activities with clients. So yeah, so I'm just now trying to build up on the substance abuse part,
okay.
because all the other parts are easier to understand. You can get referrals, but it's difficult to try and convince, or because in most instances, even some medical practitioners are not really equipped in terms of treating substance use disorders on an outpatient level. So oftentimes you'd find it is believed that if you have a substance use disorder, you must just go to a treatment center or rehabilitation center. And it's quite expensive, especially for those private ones. And we don't really have a lot of government-owned rehabilitation centers. So
Mm,
I'm looking more on an outpatient program, someone who's still in the mild to moderate stages of substance use disorders, to try and bridge that gap, because I believe if you try and modify patterns, of occupations, then we can actually get somewhere.
mm,
Where else the person, you can suggest that they go for detoxification in an authorized hospital, and then continue with your outpatient for addressing occupational needs and trying to get this person to be functional in their society, either be at work or at school and so forth. Yeah.
mm. No, I love the story, hey. And I mean, the only question I would ask is, I mean, being an OT and starting up an area of interest with substance abuse, I mean, was that quite difficult to do? Is there certain like training, or is there certain things that you need to do that? Um,
Yeah, it was a bit difficult. Actually, when I moved from doing general OT work and moving to substance solely, it was a bit difficult with just the experience that I had, or the theory that I had from university. So I had to do a diploma in addictions care with the University of Cape Town to try and better understand the science behind addiction, why it's considered a chronic brain mental health disorder. So yeah, so I did that for 2 years, and I must say it was really quite helpful, because now I can comprehensively treat patients with SUDs and be confident that the treatment that I'm administering is going to make a difference.
mm,
So yeah, just solely just having a qualification of occupational therapy is not really enough, because you need to understand, it's more like specializing,
mm,
like with a doctor, you can become a doctor, but if you want to become a heart doctor, then you go and you become a cardiologist. So
mm,
that's what I found was quite helpful. Yeah. So I have a diploma in addictions care. So after that, I didn't experience challenges treating substances, as opposed to when I did not have the further training that I needed.
okay. And from a tools and a resources perspective, is there anything in particular? I know OTs can just build it themselves, but I mean, is there anything you have to get to equip your private practice to deal with that, or is it just the knowledge around
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So that's the thing with OT. If you're doing treatment without an activity, then I don't know what you're doing as an OT.
Mm,
Yeah, so because also part of treatment is promoting leisure. So you would need to have things like board games, of across the board, when you try and working on that, you can have your chess, your Scrabbles, everything, looking at the cultural context and the interest of your clients. And then you also need some standardized tests, for instances when you want to assess some cognitive, if there are cognitive impairments, so you can have like your developmental tests, like your DTVPAs. So yeah, so there's actually quite a lot that you need. And then you can also, if it becomes a bigger practice, then you can have things like a mini gym, where your clients can also engage in that if they're bodybuilders and they used to enjoy bodybuilding, and also to just improve general physical abilities and endurance, and just giving them new ways of coping other than using substances.
Okay, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think if any OT wants to follow, Johanna's path, I mean, I think, these are the type of questions I find like missing in, like our mainstream, like, because where do you find that? Like if I wanted to start up as, substance abuse,
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And
specialization.
you're right about that, because it's like with me, when I started out, I was looking for such information, where do you start out? Who do you consult? What kind of resources do you need? So you end up relying a lot on researchers, what other people have done on the internet. But most of the times it's not really specific to occupational therapy. It's not like hearing it from an occupational therapist who's been in that field, So for me, yeah, it was a journey of discovering new things. I'm still doing that as well, because I'm still also trying to upgrade my practice, have more clients, have referrals, especially for substance use disorders, because I think the referrals I get now are from institutions, like a mental health institution. Yeah, so where people are admitted for like a certain period of time, they see a psychologist, they see a psychiatrist, then they need to see an occupational therapist. So that's when I get referrals. But solely from a person who just comes and walks into my office and say, I have a substance use disorder, it's unlikely. But I think it's because a lot of people are not aware that an occupational therapist has a role in the treatment of substance use disorders, even before detoxification, because you still need to use motivational interviewing to try and get the client to a point where they are now ready for treatment.
I know in our other show you mentioned like a multidisciplinary team, which I really love that concept. The first time I was introduced to it. Can you take us through like who would be your typical MD, multidisciplinary team? Because I think where we should go with this is like anyone starting up a private practice, or like I know we're talking about substance abuse at the moment, but it could be any private practice. If you can figure out who your referral network is, who should be in your multidisciplinary team, you probably can understand where you should be getting the referrals. So, I mean, for you, who would be in that MDT team?
Right. Yeah. So firstly, it will be the psychiatrist, because they're the ones who would diagnose the individual with SUD from the DSM-5 as well. And then medical practitioners, oftentimes I think they're the first point of contact, especially with substance use disorders, and it can be missed because an individual will constantly go to a doctor, ask for a prescription, oftentimes asking for, but then those things are never questioned to say, but is there something else going on, So, and also that's something that I'm big on, to say that I'm trying to also just educate medical practitioners, the science and all that, the kind of people that can be referred to, people that we need to look out for. So a medical practitioner will also form part. a psychologist as well, because most people tend to go to a psychologist when they have stresses. So you might find that the underlying stresses that they have that needs a psychologist, it can also be that they are currently using substances to try and also medicate to get rid of the symptoms, you know. So a psychologist would also form part. And then, so psychiatrist, psychologist, medical doctor, and a dietitian as well, because there's issues of malnutrition oftentimes with our service users. And especially when they get admitted to hospitals, there's that issue of substances. They have to be started off on soft diets and then gradually upgrade to solids and all that. So you need an expertise from a dietitian to form part. And, you know, some people, more especially because, you know, there's a link between other conditions and substance use or substance abuse. So you might find maybe an individual goes to a dietitian because they want to lose weight. And you might find that they actually have also a substance use disorder because they're trying to cope with, you know, the shame and the bullying and the humiliation associated with their weight. So that can be picked up from there as well. Hence, I mentioned the dietitian. So I think those are and a social worker. How do I forget a social?
Yeah, we
So
missed that actually.
oh yes, I missed that.
Yeah.
Because so usually oftentimes what I see is that substance use disorder is often treated as a social work problem.
Mm.
And that's the general impression that, because, you know, a lot of times when a person is saying, oh, go see a social worker, you know, they'll help you with your psychosocial issues, your family issues and things like that. So from there, the social workers can also pick up from the psychosocial assessment what the issue is with the patient and what the family is concerned about with regards to their substance use disorders.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually a good spot. Yeah. Yeah. Because in my mind, you know, like whenever I think substance abuse, you know, I always think, you know, like psychologist, you know, and I think, you know, where we should be going to is like, you know, this MDT, you know, team. Every time there's a trigger for substance abuse, you know, the person should know actually who's in my team now, you know, like who should be in my team to be able to manage this patient better. Because I don't think it's ever like one-sided. You know, you can't just fix the eating right without fixing, as you mentioned, you know, the bullying. You know, and there's a psychological aspect to that, and there's the, you know, like tangible getting stuff done with the OT part. And that's all pretty, you know, psychiatrists to get the medication right. So yeah, I think as you know, as an industry, I think that's something that the medical industry can definitely, or healthcare industry, you know, can definitely move into. And I think where this comes, you know, because you worked in, you know, government institutions and stuff like that, and in those institutions, it seems to work because you're working with those people. But I find like, you know, in a clinic or like, and stuff like that, you might not have all of those people, but virtually, you know, you still have to connect up those. So, you know, you serve the patient better. But yeah, I think at the moment it's more challenging on how you do it. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah.
And private practice, was it easy? Was it just like getting into OT?
Private practice. It was a bit difficult because when you start out, first of all, the market, you know, you have to constantly market yourself, you know, tell people that you're out there, the services you're rendering, you know, and more especially because it's people don't know what OT is.
I know.
So so oftentimes you are still trying to explain what OT is, you know, and the role that we play. So so for me that was a bit challenging to say. People don't come for OT because they don't know what OT is. So as part of working on my practice, I would go door to door, you know, even with medical practitioners. It's funny. Some don't even know what OTs do, you know. Yeah.
That's quite funny, actually.
Yeah, it's really funny because I had like my husband is a medical doctor, right?
Okay.
So I had to like educate him on what OT is every time. So now every time he comes back, like, oh, I saw a patient, I'm going to refer to OT, even like he works for a government hospital. So I was like, okay, so there's clearly a gap in the medical field with regards to occupational therapy, you know. So I always try to educate what OT is, you know, the kind of services I render, you know. If need be, I can come to the practice, you know, see one patient, demonstrate what I do, the kind of treatment setting that I do, the kind of treatment that I do, the kind of conditions that I treat, and what is the role of an occupational therapy in an individual's life. It's not easy, but yeah. So I'm still, even now, I'm still. It's a continuous thing, you know. It's a continuous thing. Still doing it. Still going. Still trying to get clients. Every time I see a client, still have to explain to the client why they came to see me. What is an OT? Because
Yeah.
the client will say, I've been referred to an OT, and the first thing I'll say, but what do you know about OT? What can you tell me about OT? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just heard the word, and they said I must come here. Then
Mm.
we start from there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a bit challenging. Still is because yeah, still is, you know, you make plans, you're expecting to see clients sometimes pay, you know, you still
Mm.
have activities to buy, you still have resources to buy for the practice, you know, and just maintain it, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not an easy journey, but I believe it'll get there.
Okay. Yeah. I think, I mean, the only, I won't say advice, but, what we've seen with many practitioners is there's definitely that tipping point. I think, like with everything, like with business, with life, even relationships, there's definitely that tipping point, where it becomes easier. And, the
Mm,
referral networks are just happening, the private practice just works, and stuff like that. So that's the only thing I would see. I think, like what we saw with many practitioners is, get the admin and operational side right. The second one is get the referrals right. If you can get that right, and then I think, what people like yourself, like healthcare practitioners like yourself, do really well is you're always upskilling. You're always at almost like the forefront of your areas of interest, and that part normally is like, what people struggle with. But I find healthcare practitioners, they got that part right. So on our side, I mean, it's been a mission for a while now, for many years. But the one is, how do we help better around the admin and operational side? And if we can do that, then in some way we contribute. And I think what we on now, the journey that we're on, is how do we drive referrals as well? Because I think if we can do that, if we can drive referrals and also help, like, people like yourself create that MDT team. Because we have, I mean, like I mentioned, the drug rehab center, on the East Rand, we know those type of people, and we should actually be connecting the dots sometimes for our clients, or and even if they're not clients, like, and seeing, how do we do that? Because we know it works. Like, so how do we do that though in the world that we're living in?
mm,
Would be the next step. So I think for us, that's our mission.
definitely.
Um,
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, it'll make life easier because a lot of times treatment is fragmented, you know. You see a psychologist there, you see an OT there, so there's never that link as to say, okay, so this is the client we're dealing with, this is what we're looking out for, and this is the treatment, and you know, so yeah, so
yeah.
that
So
would be assist.
yeah, like on our last show, we had Shelly Hall. She's a clinical psychologist, and we were talking about postpartum depression. And it sounds
Mm,
really weird. I mean, we've had, two children now, and in both the cases, the gynecologist, as an example, never mentioned that actually, you could, to my wife, obviously, but all apparently dads get postpartum depression too. But like, postpartum depression might be something you experience. So similar to how we have, like pre-marriage counseling, it would be
mm,
amazing if, like, the gynecologist just said, actually, go speak to someone about, like, maybe, like, what
Mm.
what you should be aware about around postpartum depression. I mean, there's
Mm.
no, like there's no cost to it, but it's just like knowing that. And I think if someone mentioned that to us, or that gynecologist mentioned, we probably would have went for it,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it's interesting.
Mm.
And I think
Mm.
that's the opportunity. I think with the healthcare practitioners, the awareness part, putting together these MDT teams would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very true because when you're talking about that, I'm thinking as well, as part of occupational therapy, we also look into child rearing, and that's something a lot of people don't know, that OTs are also also have a role in that. So actually, OTs have a role in everything because
Yeah.
occupations are what we do on a daily basis, right?
Mm.
So, from organizing parenting programs, facilitating and assisting newly mothers, it's a new thing, Um, I myself went through that, and I just thought, you know what? Imagine if there was a support group for new mothers, where certain things are addressed, and all these things, because it facilitates a more, you feel like you understood, there's cohesion, there's universality, and you feel like, oh, okay, I'm not going through this alone, and how can we best work out so that we are successful in this journey, as opposed to attending to it at a later stage where things have piled up, and now you're at a stage where your mental health can't take it anymore. So yeah, we have a long way to go.
Mm. Yeah. No, agreed. I think, would you say that almost, you mentioned it a few times now, but, like with occupational therapist, do you think the title actually doesn't help sometimes? Like people don't understand. Although when you said that now, I'm thinking occupation, job, therapist, like it kind of makes
Mhm.
sense. But you always think it's
Yeah.
like an adult problem. It's like when you working maybe.
Yeah,
But
it's quite funny, by the way, because every time you say I'm an occupational therapist, people are thinking you're going to help them get a job, or you're going to help them with job related issues. But yeah, so I think also the wording is somewhat misleading. Only an individual within the occupational therapy field would understand what you're talking about. But occupations are occupations are things like work, your basic activities of daily living. And that on its own has other things under it. And then you get play as well for kids. That's why we do, say, your sensory integration and all that. So there's play, there's rest and sleep as well.
Mhm.
So there's rest and sleep as well. There's leisure, there's social participation. So those are occupations that we focus on. And under each and every heading, there are subheadings of what is leisure, what is social participation, what is basic activities of daily living, what is instrumental activities of daily living, what is work, work can mean work performance, vocational skills. So it's a lot.
Mm.
So it's everything that an individual does on a daily basis that gives them quality of life or meaning in life.
Mm.
So
That's amazing. Yeah. I think we do have to wrap up quite soon, and I love this conversation. It was amazing. But is there anything, firstly, I mean, probably coming back to the private practice, is there anything that you find that, you wish you had right now, or, like, and it could be anything, but I mean, is there anything that you find, like, when you went into private practice, that you wish you knew before, or even right now, you wish you had?
I wish I had a mentor. Yeah,
Okay.
I wish I had a mentor because, oftentimes, especially if you're still young in the field, yes, you might have the knowledge and the theory, but the experience, I found that experience usually counts a lot, you know? So, yeah, I wish I had a mentor whom I can, just share things with. Like a supervisor of some sort, especially in the private practice, like a sort of like a club, a mentor club, sort of. Yeah,
Mm-mm.
so Yeah, and then I wish I knew that there's a lot of administration. But
Yeah.
luckily, luckily, thanks to the software, because um, that's just it eliminates a lot of things, having to manually send claims to medical aids and all that. So I find that is very helpful.
Mm.
So yeah, just generally an idea, just a mentor to just help guide through the process of how they started out and the challenges you're going to experience along the way, the
It's actually,
inconsistency in financials.
yeah, yeah. I think you're mentioning a really good point. And, I was thinking about MDT and, you mentioned the software and like even where we are right now, we started looking at a lot more things like you mentioned, financials, referrals, I think is a big one. Just general, like, following up with medical aids, like how would you do that? And without the practitioner picking up the phone and phoning one of the medical aid companies, how would you do that? But what you're saying now is probably, giving me an idea around almost, because you talk about I have to look it up again because I'm thinking in my head, drug addiction, but service users, when they go into like AA, they always have a sponsor. It's almost like when you go into private practice, maybe you should have like be linked with a sponsor, and the sponsor is like responsible for helping you. If you can get like a concept like that together, that would be amazing.
That
Um,
would really be amazing.
yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely give it some thought, see how we can bring a concept like that, or
Right.
keep thinking about it anyway. So Johanna, I love this, but I want to ask one last question, which is there anything around being an occupational therapist or going into private practice that you thought I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I think we covered most of the things. Maybe just tired.
Cool. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I think we've covered the important stuff. And I just want to say, as an occupational therapist, especially working with substance use with service users, you tend to experience a lot of counter transference. So what I mean by that is that you're going to treat patients who are going to have personalities that reminds you of either your childhood trauma or either a personality that you despise, and it's that just that thing when you see a patient and you feel, I just don't like this patient, but I don't know why. So you're going to experience a lot of counter transferences. So it's important that you get supervision, and you try and understand where it's coming from. It might be that the person you're treating looks like somebody who once made you angry and things like that. So you constantly have to work through that so that you provide adequate care, because otherwise you'll just push patients away just because you don't like them, and especially with service users, they tend to be a lot manipulative, and with the forensic history as well. Oftentimes you feel you're dealing with dangerous people, but as you get to know them, you realize that there's more to it than just the behavior. So yeah, so just generally just being aware of the kind of people that you are treating and that they are also there for receiving treatment. Yeah, so just always have to be firm, be empathetic, be compassionate. So so I think those are most of the things that you need besides physically and mentally strong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we've done over 100 episodes so far, and I've never heard a practitioner mention countertransference, which is amazing. I mean, thanks so much for mentioning that. It makes a lot of sense, and I think they might have said it in different ways. Like we've had practitioners that said, you have to take care of yourself, which is what you just said now. If you can't take care of yourself, I mean, you're not going to take care of other people. It goes without saying, but like we mentioned even in the other shows, the easier things, we don't get right. Like eating properly, sleeping properly, just drinking the water and stuff like that. But I think if you, as a practitioner, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're probably not going to do a good enough job, with patients, and over time, it's not going to be a good sight, I suppose.
That's
But yeah,
fair.
thanks for mentioning that. I actually start asking that a lot more, like the counter transfer and stuff. Thanks
Yeah,
so
it's
much.
it's it's like the other way around where the client transfers, like they look at you and they just don't like you as well, you
Okay.
know. So there's transference and counter transference.
Hmm.
So yeah, so you constantly have to work through it, just address it. Okay, this and this, would you like for me to refer you to another therapist, or is it something that we can work through, and you just work it out. So that tends to happen a lot in substance use disorders. It happens a
Uh,
lot.
okay. And maybe that's why, we haven't had many of this area of interest. I think we'll start picking up the pace, maybe, as an area of interest. But yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And I thought, from a client point of view or a patient, it's easier because they can just like not make the next appointment. I mean, you don't have, whereas as a therapist, I didn't think of it from a therapist's point of view, because you're sitting on the other side, the person you got ethical, guidelines and all of that, and you can't just say, actually, I don't like you,
No, and you can't, and you try not to show them that, like, that's how you are feeling. Hence, I'm saying supervision in that regard plays a really important role. You can go and discuss, debrief with a colleague. I'm having challenges with this patient, and I think it stems from this and this and this. Then you work work it out. And then when you go back, you find that no, actually, that's what was happening, and I've managed to resolve it. So, yeah.
Okay, amazing. So let's leave it there. Thanks, Joanna, for your time. Thanks for doing this. We so appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.